Welcome back to the Macro Golf YouTube channel. We're back with Levi, back here at Chapel Springs, and we're extending our series of talking about different parts of the body and how different parts of the body are working through the golf swing. So we've covered the body in its entirety, how the body swings the golf club, how body kind of drives the power and motion through the golf club. We spoke about the hips.
Yeah.
We spoke about the wrists, shoulders next. That's where we're going.
Definitely.
We're onto shoulders. So we're going to take through kind of similar process what we have done in these previous videos, and I'll tag all those videos here. We're going to work through really kind of what the correct movement should be of some of these areas and how this area of the body is going to drive power, motion, consistency, all of the above, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. Again, I'm going to put all of Levi's details below this video, so make sure you go and check out all of the stuff that he's doing and get in touch with him if you need any help with your game. So, shoulders, where do we go, Levi? Where do we start?
Where do you want to start?
That's a great question. I think we've already started really well in the previous videos we've done of starting at setup, and then talking through the different kind of stages and phases of the swing as we move through setup. So obviously when we talk about shoulders, we're going to cover a little bit through torso as well, and kind of how this kind of segment moves, I think, as we're working our way out through the body. So we might dive into a little bit of spine stuff, a little bit of kind of thoracic stuff. But where do we start in terms of shoulder, in terms of setup, in terms of that initial part of the golf swing that we started to spoke about before?
Yeah, so the thing is, it's very, very important that first of all, we get into good posture, good setup. So what we'll find is when we are in good posture and good setup, things that we spoke about in the previous videos, that with this right arm, we get two kind of rotations coming into this shoulder. We either get internal rotation or we get external rotation. Internal rotation is going to cause a lot of problems like instability. The external rotation is more of what we're after. So let's say if I put my right arm in front of me and then I rotate my bicep and tricep this way to where my palm is then going to be more facing the wall in front of me, that is where I'm going to leave the arm alone and then put the hand on top, because we've got three joints really running in the arm, including the shoulder. We've got the wrist joint, we've got the elbow joint, and we've got the shoulder joint. So we can get this external rotation in this shoulder, but still have the hand on top. And it's very, very important that we get into that.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting you say that. And this is actually one of the reasons why, of many reasons, but it's one of the reasons why we find it so hard to walk on our hands. So we walk with our legs because our hips are designed to create natural stability by tucking in. If you were to lay on your back, for example, your feet would fall outwards. We naturally create stability in the hip by tucking in and squeezing and kind of locking in this hip joint for us to allow us to walk. But shoulders, we've got a lot of motion in both directions, which allows us to do a lot of activities, but it also means that they're not necessarily very stable in their initial setup. So for sure, dragging arms in this way, when we think of doing bench press exercises, anything like that is always going to add more stability. And one of the best ways of testing that is if you try and take your arm overhead with your knuckles facing the sky. It's very easy. As soon as we turn the palm open and create this type of rotation, it becomes a lot stiffer because we've kind of stabilized this shoulder joint, right?
Exactly that. So this is the thing. We want to create, like you said, range of motion, but also as well, we want to create stability in the movement.
Correct.
So it's having that blend and having that balance of both.
For sure. Might be nice to actually talk about one of the ways that people can test how much range they've got in the shoulder. Actually, we've not done this in some of our other videos, but it's something we spoke about. So there's a couple of tests that I normally use. One is just a standard 90-90 test. If I do this to the camera here. So if you guys can test this at home, if we just get our elbow out to the side, keeping the rib cage tucked down, elbow at 90 degrees, and simply just open up and just see how much range we've got in the shoulder. And ideally for players that I work with, I want people to be able to get at least the spine angle. Ideally, and I know for a lot of the work that you do with your players, you'd want them past spine angle for some of the stuff you're going to get into. So that'd be one of the ways we can test that from home. And then another way we can do that is do the same bit in golf posture. And this will give us a little bit more of a measure of stability as well as the mobility we've got. So guys at home can measure this and work on that as well. So
if you just do that again for me.
Yes, please.
I just want to sort of go over something as well. So just get into that position there.
Yep.
Very, very important where the elbow sits, that it doesn't retract.
Correct.
And we try and do this. It wants to stay much more in line with the spine.
Correct. And what you'll also find is if you've got poor posture and shoulders are rounded forward, for example, you're actually going to find it's a lot harder to get into range. That's why it's quite important that we actually stay in good posture. Actually allows the shoulder to move in its correct slot, which actually probably gets onto posture in terms of setup as well. It's probably quite important there.
So when you do this, where should you feel this in the shoulder? So whenever obviously I get players working on this kind of exercise, you'll feel this much more on the top of the shoulder, so more like the delt kind of area. So obviously where you've got your rear delt and then you've got, let's say more, let's keep it basic, more the top of the delt, that's where you'll be feeling it. Because for me, I've always said when you stabilize a mobile joint, that's where you'll then pressure the muscle. Same as the wrist. If you stabilize the wrist joint, you then pressure more like, let's say, the forearm. So that's where. So that's obviously quite a good
And you
test.
might find that some people, for example, here might get a blocking feeling here, which is always interesting for us to understand. What is it that's getting stiff for them? Are they feeling a blockage? Are they feeling a tightness? And actually what I find most people with the shoulder is more of this blocking feeling. They might feel they just kind of run out of space and they just can't move anymore. And actually there's loads of stuff we can do for that that's going to release it quite quick. And actually maybe I'll tag a video here, some exercises people can do as well that will help them with that.
Yeah, brilliant.
Where do we go from there?
Yeah,
okay. I know we diverted a little bit, so
no, that's fine.
Let's go back.
To be fair, it's very, very important that we cover these things, because at the end of the day, we've always said that the player's got to be able to do these, whether it's in a screening, because the thing is, if a player's not able to physically do it, really, really going to struggle doing it in the golf swing.
For sure.
So into good posture, right arm wants to sit down into external rotation. The left arm can kind of sit either internally or it can sit externally. It doesn't really matter. It will rotate internally, the left arm. So you might see players in the past, like Tiger Woods, even Brooks Koepka, let's say, sit this left arm into this position here, and they will get some form of rotation to get that left arm, left shoulder sitting this way. So this would be very much like Brooks at the top. And then you might get certain players that sit this underneath a little bit, which would be more like an Adam Scott. So the left arm is very, very down to whatever you kind of feel. But today we're mainly going to be talking more about the right shoulder.
I just want to jump on that quickly. Is there any association between how this arm is sitting and any type of bending of the left elbow at the top of the backswing?
Yeah, so the left arm doesn't have to, and I hear it all the time, the left arm needs to be really, really straight throughout the golf swing. The left arm needs to be relatively straight, but at the same time, it's really not be all end all. Because yet again, it could be down to a flexibility issue. It could be even down to somebody's had an injury before and they can't quite straighten it. So you look at Lee Westwood. Lee Westwood has a natural bend in his left arm. Something that Pete Cowan's talked about sort of like before, where, Lee would be more like this at impact, coming through impact. But that actually is a really, really good way of keeping the face stable. You have a look at Brooks does that. Jordan Spieth does that. Hovland does that.
Hovland's one that comes to mind.
Lee Westwood does that. More players than you think have this bent sort of like left arm, but as long as it's stable going through and there's no real rotation going through, this is why we've got to keep it all nice and stable. So we want to kind of limit the rotation at the wrist, and we want to keep the shoulder stable going through the shot.
I suppose the difference is they're carrying on rotating as well, right? So it actually is allows, whereas if they would stop and stall, and that's where they could probably get into more issues. So
Correct.
The fact that they're still turning through allows them to kind of get away with that
Definitely.
more than what a typical amateur would get away with.
Correct, yeah.
Nice. I know we have diverted away again. Sorry. So let's take this into starting to move into this backswing position then. So how do things start to progress as we go here?
So this right arm, like I said, sits at external at address. So when it starts moving up and the wrist starts hinging, we want to be feeling that the shoulder is going with the body motion. So you're almost feeling that the arm is rotating as the body is opening up. So if I rotate the bicep, tricep, you can see the hand creating the natural rotation because it's going with the arm, with the shoulder, and it's sitting on that 45-degree angle, which is perfectly on plane. And that is where we're then going to get into that strong, stable position up top, where, let's say, if I used, and this is quite a good test, and just to sort of like explain to players, for range of motion, things like that. If I got, let's say, a cable and I put it into, let's say, internal rotation, for me to try and get this above my shoulder, it doesn't quite work.
Yep.
So if I was now going to get it into external rotation and move it up, it becomes a lot easier, and it becomes, a lot more stable, so my body can hold its posture and things like that.
Yeah, and actually the reason for that is this is using a different part of the shoulder. So
Correct.
When you did it the first way, we're using rear delt. Imagine you getting onto like a reverse fly type exercise. You're never going to be as strong as you are
of course.
Rotating this through and working into like a lateral raise exercise. So it's a much bigger part of the shoulder working on the outside. It's much bigger, much stronger, much more stable.
Yeah, so like I said, it's very, very important that we get that movement in there. So external rotation is going to sit into this nice stable position at the top, and then when it comes down, we want to keep it stable as the arm works down underneath, let's say, the shoulder. So we keep that nice good amount of width up top, and then we extend the width out, but keeping this right shoulder into external rotation. That's where the body really then has got to work hard to actually get the club working out onto the arc.
I suppose that becomes very difficult if it's unstable at that point, right? You're going to feel very weak. You're going to feel lost. You're going to feel like there's not much strength or power to work from, right?
Correct. Yes. So this is the thing. So this is where players will come over the top, get into the top, into that position there. As soon as this shoulder goes internally rotated as it comes down. So this could be a number of reasons. This could be trying to hit at the golf ball rather than trying to move through the positions. You just got to remember that golf is a stationary ball game. So we don't.
I want to see that. I want to see a little visual of that. I think we can see.
So if I'm in position here, if I'm in posture, if I work it up into that position there, if I start now working the arm underneath the shoulder, as the shoulder stays external, if I now move the body with it, that's what will get the club working out on the arc, and that is where you'll then get a much more stable club face position going through it. So this works down, but the body then has to work harder. And this is what we want. We want the body working harder to keep the face stable. If a player comes internal rotation, let's say at this point here, he doesn't actually have to move his body because his arm and shoulders, doing the job. Is getting the wrong role, basically.
And let's just see that again in terms of visual of the steepness in terms of that, how that moves over. So as we work the other way, we can then start to see everything start to steepen.
And this ball's either going to go left, depending on the face, or that's where we're going to create more of a slice.
Yeah.
But also as well, shank.
You had to say it. So as we've come down, we've spoken here about the top in terms of transition, in terms of creating this. How do we then unload this and work through the other side of the swim? Because I think this is sometimes where people talk about chicken winging, people talk about stalling through this stage. So how do the shoulders then release down closer through impacts and releasing through the other parts?
Correct, yeah. So really the correct release is more of like a push action. So if you use like an alignment stick, or I use G-force, which is basically a hypersensitive shaft. If you go in there, it should be the blue shaft. So closest to us, the wedge, 55 degree, perfect. Right, so I put you right on the spot there, didn't I?
No, you're good.
Right, so hypersensitive shaft, it's probably one of the best training aids out there. So if I work it up, let's say halfway into this position here, if I keep it external and work it down, this now is what unloads the shaft. So it creates much more of like a push force. So if I then kept it at external, pushed it down, but then I incorporate a little bit of rotation, that's what will get the club working out on the arc correctly. So this is why it's important that the body has got to work down and left as the club's working down.
Can we see the wrong way of that?
Of course,
Can we see how that reacts?
So if I'm in this position here, if I now get this working internally rotated, what you'll see is down the line that the club face is open. So we're creating much more of a wipe strike. This is where the ball's not going to stay on the face for long. It's going to create more, let's say, of a deflection out to the right. Mm-hmm. So the ball's going to start right and it's got no pressure on it. So if I demonstrate that again, if I work the handle, let's say this way, you can see that it's going to create much more of a wipe strike. Whereas let's say if I keep it external, I work it down with the correct body rotation, you can see naturally that my legs want to get involved, my hips, my shoulders and my chest want to get involved. The club face is now stable and it's working on the arc correctly, and that is what's then going to pressure the ball and keep the control in the shot. For
sure, you can see that quite clearly, and that also shows us the relationship between what's going on up here and everything that's going on down here, right?
Correct.
We've obviously tried to segment these videos a little bit to not let people get lost in the world, but what we're actually saying here is what's happening with the shoulder is going to really have a chain reaction of everything that's going down lower in the body as well.
Definitely. So like I said, if we can load this up, learn to pressure it down as we get correct rotation onto it, we can get into this position much more consistently, and we have much more control of this because of the joint is stable. As soon as this gets unstable, we've got so many variables. We could literally create so many different shapes on shots, but also as well different start lines. So I'm a big believer of if you don't know where the ball's going to start, you don't know where it's going to finish.
Pretty true. Pretty true. So I will put some tags of videos of people that they can work on testing their shoulder mobility and some exercises. Any drills you would recommend? Obviously, this is one that you're gonna recommend. I'm assuming. Definitely. Working on with an alignment stick or a bending shaft. Any other drills people can work on to start feeling their shoulder stability for themselves and start to understand what this should feel like for them?
Yeah, I think a good exercise is to get the feeling of, let's say, the left hand underneath the right elbow. So this would be a really, really good one to just start. This would be almost like a starter pack, like a beginner pack for this. So getting the feeling that the body's going to rotate and getting the feeling that the bicep, tricep is going to rotate on the hand to where we can get into like more of a shoulder press position. From here, we're going to keep the pressure in the shoulder as we work the arm down, almost like we're pulling a cable down. So if I'm in this position here, I'm going to try and get the feeling that I'm pulling a cable down, keeping the pressure in the shoulder. That's where I can then rotate and get it much more under here. So naturally, I'm much more into a good solid, let's say, delivery position here. So my body's actually really had to work hard. And you can see there that this hasn't rotated over.
Yep.
This is still in that externally rotated position. So anything that we can kind of do in the gym, perfect.
There we go. I knew you wanted it out, so I thought I'd get it for you.
So yeah, so like if I got this by a dumbbell, and if I rotated the dumbbell into like a presetted position, if I now worked it up, let's say halfway, that is where we would want to see it.
Yep.
So let's say if it's here, rotate it into that 45-degree position. That's where we would want to see it in the backswing, and then coming down, keep it pointing at that 45 and just lower it, get the body rotating. Now that's perfectly on plane in position.
Yep. Perfect.
Yes.
I think everyone's going to get their, everyone's got like a 1 kilo weight knocking around at home.
Correct.
And they're going to get it out and they're going to use it for this. Anything else you feel like we need to cover, Levi? Anything going on past Impact? Anything over kind of in this world that we need to cover?
Yeah, one more little thing. So if anybody has any questions about what the left arm, left shoulder should be doing, this is where it works very, very well for even pitching and bunker play and things like that. Nice. So let's say if I got into this position here and I worked it up, so we're naturally going to get the correct rotation into this 45-degree position. Now, if I let this arm drop, that's no good, because now we're creating drive on the handle, there's no release. This is where it's then going to chicken wing. That's what you said, because the body basically can stall, right? So if I carried on going, it would have to break down because this shoulder would come out of its socket. So if I went into this position here at 45 degrees, if I got the bicep, tricep rotating this way and I let it fall, that is now sitting square face. So that is technically what the left arm, left shoulder should do. And that is for people out there that basically have got that as a question still. So we covered mainly right shoulder, but left shoulder would work into this position here. This would then rotate down and that would then be square. That's where that would then sit much more into here, almost like you're holding a tray, or you can, let's say, shoulder press from that position.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And are there any changes that we would make? Short game, bunkers, pitching, anything varied here? Because there was a lot of variation when we spoke about everything else. So when we spoke about how the hips were working, when we spoke about how the wrists were working, there was a big difference in terms of wrists. In terms of shoulders, anything that changes dramatically when we move from shot to shot?
Define that. What do you mean by that?
Fade, draw, high, low,
that's
bunker,
fine.
Full shot.
Yeah, so really when it comes to, let's say, shoulder loading and things like this, this is where you'll find players much more working, let's say, into this position of rotation, left shoulder. And then for some players, they would really want to get this rotating. So you can see what that would do to the shaft. It would steepen it and it'd get it working down. So this worked very, very well for Tiger when he worked with players, like Hank Haney. They would get it very much sitting here at the top, and that allowed him to work it down and in front to where he would never get it stuck behind him. So where Tiger used to get a bit across the line, and he used to then have to really fire his body, that's what him and Hank Haney worked on. They worked on very much trying to get this left shoulder sitting into this position here where it's internally rotated, and then it would come down externally rotated. It's something that Brooks does quite well as well. So you'll see Brooks much more into this impact position here, but this is much more stable for it, and then that can then release. So that would be much more fade pattern. Sits this way, and then it can come down that way. And then draw pattern, where you'd see someone like Adam Scott. Scotty would sit this way, and then it would rotate down this way still. But he didn't sit it this way aggressively. He sit it more here neutrally. So when it came down, it sits more here. So that's how you can get your elbows tighter together. It's simply this kind of rotation.
What you're getting is a stable move, right?
Stable, correct. As long as this right shoulder is stable, because that's what controls the club head and shaft. The left arm, left shoulder, like I said in previous videos, that's what controls the butt of the club.
Yeah. Makes sense. Guys, please, again, drop your questions that you have down below. We tried our best to answer them. You had to answer them. I couldn't answer them. Levi done his best to answer them. So, yeah, if you do have any questions, stick them below. And also let us know any other videos you want covered. I think we're going to start to try and expand out now. I think we'll have covered this little series.
Yeah.
So any other questions, any other videos you want covered, again, just drop us a message and let us know. But again, I'll put all Levi's details below. So do reach out to him directly as well if you've got any questions specifically on your golf game. Levi, thanks again, man.
All right.
Appreciate it.